Hello, I'm Julie Malcolm and this is my story. This time it's about the food for the poor, the application process, and my attempts to assist an applicant with her application. Now, this applicant is known to me personally. We're very close, and she desired housing assistance from the food for the poor. She had made her application 3 years prior. She did not receive any information regarding whether they would move forward with it or they would just deny her the opportunity. And so one day she approached me while she was on a call with a representative from Food for the Poor. She asked me to take the call. I took the call. It turned out to be the Housing Investigations Unit, and the representative that I spoke with, or that we spoke with, introduced herself as Miss Norma Reed. Now, Miss Reed was interested in finding out whether the applicant was still in need of the house from Food for the Poor. The applicant said yes, and Miss Reed moved to request additional documentation. An update of the application was what she called it. She mentioned some documents that were required from the applicant, said they should be, when the JP signs something? They should be certified by a justice of the peace, and that they should be submitted to her electronically. This was during the pandemic, so it didn't seem odd to me. So of course, the applicant was not tech savvy, and that's how I got involved. I was asked to submit the documents on her behalf. I did so. I followed up also for about 6 to 8 weeks to find out if they had received it, what were the next steps in the process. It took about 6 to 8 weeks for somebody to finally say with some surety, yes, we have your application documents that you submitted via email. And then things became kind of uncomfortable. During the follow-up process, I noticed that a few members of the applicant's family were called. And it wasn't the calling that bothered me. As I said, it's a housing investigations division or unit. So you expected them to investigate, to call around, to visit, to investigate. But Miss Norma Reed called the mother of the applicant and asked the mother of the applicant for the applicant's telephone number. Then she called the applicant and asked the applicant whether the documentation was submitted, and for her to state specifically from which email address the documents were submitted. The mother of the applicant and the applicant herself came to me. So of course I tried to call Miss Reed. I couldn't get through. I sent an email. Later on that day, we ended up on a call together. I don't remember right now who initiated that call that we finally got each other on. And we spoke at length, and I told her I'm having trust issues. The calls, why, for example, would you call somebody external to the application process to ask that person for the number of the applicant? When if you had truly been dealing with the application, the applicant's number would have been visible on the documents that would have been in front of you. Yes? I asked her if she really made those calls, and her response was, I can neither confirm or deny if I have made those calls. There are other persons in the office who are dealing with the application, and as a result, anybody could have made the calls, but I cannot confirm if I made the call or I did not. Now, the person who made the call identified herself as Miss Norma Reed. Something else that I noticed is that when we spoke in July, Miss Reed specifically told me that the matter was of great urgency and that the documentation that she required requested, and when I say documentation, I mean serious information relating to ownership of land, description of land, identification information of the owners. That's what I mean. Everything that you would need to go to the titles office to apply for a title for a property, or if you're planning to sell a property. And the level of urgency from July just went, it just vanished. Everything became stagnant. And I recall her stressing urgency because in our conversation, I asked her for a time period, how long do we have before these documents are to be submitted? She said, right away. You must submit these documents immediately. I asked, are you the point person with whom we will communicate when we contact Food for the Poor? She said, I'm going on leave, so I will not be around. And if you wait for me to return from leave, this is July, if you wait for me to return from leave, you're going to be in a predicament. You may lose the opportunity, it may delay the process. So please submit these at your earliest convenience. This is January 2022. We have heard very little, if anything, from Food for the Poor Housing Investigations Unit. And when we call, the calls are unsettling because you're not getting through to the individuals that you want. And if you name Miss Reed, by the time she gets on the phone, she gets angry with you and specifically reminds you, do not ask for me by name when you call this office. Do not ask to speak with me. And my position had been and still remains, you are the person who got me involved in this situation. So if I call the office and I'm not able to find anybody who can assist me, I'm going to name you as the person with whom I interacted, because when I submitted the documents to you and I copied the office. So to me, whether you want to be or not, you are my point person until this process is complete, regardless of what the outcome is. The last time I spoke with Miss Reed on the phone, she requested additional documentation regarding ownership of property to verify that the land for the dropping of the house or the placement of the Food for the Poor house was legitimately owned and was actually available. And as time passed, we became suspicious. It wasn't just me with a suspicious bone in my body. The applicant, her family members became suspicious. We placed a call and we shared with Food for the Poor that we suspect land fraud. We were told that the matter would be reported to a manager and that we would be contacted. That was toward the end of 2021. This is January 2022 and we have heard nothing. Now, there's a greater concern beyond the availability or the provision of housing for Food for the Poor, and that is the land on which the Food for the Poor house is to be placed, the documents associated with that land. Will they be used to fraudulently apply for titles? To fraudulently draft other documents that say that this land has been given as a gift to a married couple? I draw reference to a recent newspaper article regarding a former custos of, I think it was Portland, whose son is now homeless because 267, it is alleged, acres of land belonging to the father, the custos who had dementia, was given as a gift to a married couple. Now, the concern of the family is that the land documents may be used in this kind of activity, and this is why the family seeks to interact with the Food for the Poor. whether by telephone or by email, because we're told that face-to-face meetings are out of the question. Even with the initial application, the applicant said she had to submit the documentation to the security guard at the entrance to the property. So the family does have concern regarding what will transpire from this point. There are concerns over the property and how the documents will be used, because seeing that it appears they are not being used to fast track or to process the applicant's application for housing. Why were they requested? What are they being used to do? Why did you need additional documentation? And why have you ceased to move with the speed of lightning? This is my attempt to further assist the applicant to reach out to Food for the Poor. You have ceased to answer your telephones. You have ceased to respond to emails. The applicant is concerned. The owners of the property are concerned that land fraud was the motive for the sudden request in July for additional documents, and following their submission, the sudden loss of interest in communicating further with the applicant. Food for the Poor, Housing Investigations Unit. I am Julie Malcolm. You have emails from me, so you will know which applicant I speak of, and you will know how to contact us based on the documentation that was emailed to you. Please reach out to me via email, via any means necessary, and allow us to have dialogue to allay any fears that we have regarding any fraudulent activity surrounding the documents that have been submitted for the property on which your house should be placed. I'm Julie Malcolm, and this is my story.